Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with New York City saxophonist Noah Preminger. Over the course of our interview, he enlightened us about today's jazz world and about his roots in music. He just released a new album, Pivot, live at the 55 Bar in 2015, and he talked about how his parents were music enthusiasts with a huge record collection that gave him a strong musical backbone. Originally from Connecticut, he calls New York his home these days, and he's done quite well there, playing and learning from the likes of Cecil McBee, John McNeil, Fred Hersch, and many others. Since his first critically acclaimed album, Dry Bridge Road, released just after his 21st birthday, he has been off and running forward with gigs, teaching, recordings, and much, much more. So please dig this interview, my friends.
Thank you for taking some time out today. I appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
So I'm going to go ahead and dive right in here. I noticed that you just mastered a new album that's coming out. You had a very nice cover spread. Give me an idea of what has been going on with you, just kind of a snapshot of what's been happening lately.
Lately, I've come to the realization that I need to just pump out my ideas. And I have a lot of ideas, and I need to not be concerned about, anything other than just putting it down on paper and recording it and presenting it to the world. So I kind of gave myself a challenge, although it's not really a challenge. It's just I want to try to put out a new record every 6 months if I can. I did this Pivot record, this live record you just mentioned, and it came out a few months back. And now I've almost completed another record, which is sort of more exploration into the Delta Mississippi blues music, and where I recorded 9 songs by 9 different Delta Mississippi blues musicians that I really love. And that's not a live record, but it's the same band as the last record, though. And then I have a bunch of ideas that I'm going to pursue going forward that I'm already sort of starting to work on.
Why do you think that there's this perception that you have to wait a certain amount of time, a gestation period, before you release? Because it sounds like that's kind of the way jazz cats are. There's a lot of ideas. There's a lot of fluidity. There's a lot of things that can be put out there. How did you cross that bridge, and why do you think there's an old conception that you have to wait a certain amount of time?
That's a good question. I don't know, because if you look in the history of all the famous jazz musicians, all the masters, John Coltrane, Charlie Parker, Max Roach, Sonny Rollins, Miles Davis, Wayne Shorter, they all put out records frequently.
Yeah.
So I don't know along the line where that mentality kind of came from, but yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's has to do with critics. They don't want to be overloaded with someone's work all the time, or maybe it has to do with booking agents saying, like, let's just work on this one project for a while and promote that and book that, or I have no idea. In a time where there are fewer and fewer listeners and less of a business, I think it's important to just pump out music. I want to say what I have to say, and that's important to me.
Right on. Perfect. Let's go back to the beginning of your life in Canton, Connecticut. Talk to me about your childhood and what led you to love jazz, and more specifically, getting into music.
My parents are big music appreciators, and they like very hip music and all different kinds of music. So they still call me, both of them. They call me every now and then and say, hey, Noah, have you checked out, this person's music or this person's music? And they hit me to new stuff, which is totally great. They're really in they know the history of jazz music and the history of rock music, and they know what's going on in today. So being around that as a kid really helped me grow as a listener, and also as being able to appreciate different kinds of music. We listened to some stuff that was left, pretty adventurous, or we listened to some stuff that, never like smooth jazz, but Grateful Dead or things like that were more mainstream.
It's interesting, as you get older, you have to try and you have to really keep going and exploring music, because it seems like, as radio attests to it, some people get stuck in their high school years and do classic music. So that had to be totally cool to have parents that were hip and that they specialized in music.
Absolutely. I mean, but I grew up listening to Dave Matthews Band and Fish, and I remember I went to there was a rock band called 311, something like that. I remember going to their shows. I saw the Roots live. I saw Jay-Z live. I mean, I remember trying to sit down and memorize Eminem lyrics. So I don't think I've ever told anybody. I mean, so totally, I was totally in the present day, as well as getting things here and there from my parents and music teachers, and so I had an unbelievably fortunate upbringing where I was surrounded by lots of things to learn from. So,
well, and you became an ardent fan of saxophonist Joshua Redman. What was it about his spell that he cast on you that kind of has been with you for a while?
Well, my parents loved Josh, and so they always had, not always, I mean, they frequently had Josh's music playing, and he was just one of the number of saxophonists that I grew up listening to, and I guess Josh had around that time in the 90s, I think Josh was being pumped up by record labels. They were dumping tens and tens of thousands of dollars into PR for him, and he was putting out a lot of records, and so that was just like his time. And so that music was made available to me, and his tone is he's got an amazing sound. I mean, it's very even from all ranges, and he's a very lyrical player, and he's very bluesy, and I get the idea that he means what he says, and which is amazing because of how much money that was being pumped into him around that time. You would think that maybe his concepts would be dumbed down, maybe, I don't know, I mean, who knows, to sort of be more accessible to the public, but I think that his stuff was really great. I really like his playing.
The thing about Joshua that's interesting, that's probably really raw about his approach, is that when he got into music, it was by accident. He was not seeking this, and I think he caught somebody's ear, and he was just like, I'm just playing, and they were like, no, you're good. And I think He was kind of vaulted into that world. So, but some of the best, that's how it happens. It's by accident. But let's talk about you specifically. When you were growing up, obviously in a very music-rich household, was it your dream to get into music, or did you have other aspirations?
Well, when I started playing the saxophone, I really loved it. I really loved playing, and I loved practicing, and you had to pull the thing away from me to stop. But I've always, and throughout my, almost 30 years, I've always liked doing other things too. I've skied every day growing up. I wanted to be a ski bum for the rest of my life. We lived like a minute and a half from a little tiny ski hill in northern Connecticut. And actually I stopped skiing. I quit skiing to concentrate on music. My grandfather always wanted me to be a pro golfer, which I don't think I've ever admitted either. And so, I love playing golf, and there's a lot of jazz musicians that play golf. So it's fun. And it's a great way to meet people. I mean, I signed my first record deal on a golf course.
Cool.
And I remember my grandfather's a businessman. He always said, Noah, whether or not you become a professional golfer is, up to you, but at least you'll be able to talk business on the golf course, and that's important. I mean, it sounds ridiculous, but he's right. I mean, I signed my first deal on it.
Let me ask you about the saxophone. There's definitely a certain amount of romanticism, and people love the saxophone in the jazz world. As a sax player, what's the coolest thing about playing that instrument for you?
The tenor saxophone, to me, I mean, it's a cliche almost, but when they say it's an extension of your voice, I think the tenor really matches my personality. I think it matches my tone. I think that it's an extension of my voice. I mean, that's all there is to it. I think that I can tell stories on the saxophone. I think I can convey emotion. So it's another way for me to communicate.
So one last question before we depart the tram from childhood. I want to know, growing up around so much good music, was there one jazz album that just knocked you down? It was like, wow, that's amazing.
No, not really. I remember my parents have a big vinyl collection, so I remember My Favorite Things. John Coltrane's My Favorite Things. I remember asking my parents to play that more often. I remember not liking that record, that Coleman Hawkins, Sonny Rollins record. Hawk, is that what it's called? I'm drawing a blank right now. I remember hating that record as a kid. I remember my parents put that on. No, take that off. I hate that. But I also remember hating some later Train record that they used to play. I remember hating that as growing up too, and now I love it. I can't remember which one that is. But yeah, My Favorite Things. Also, Johnny Hartman and John Coltrane's album that they did. I love that too. From an early age, I always liked Johnny Hartman's voice on that and how Train accompanied him. But nothing really. I don't have that I listened to this record and I decided I was going to be a jazz musician from that point on. It's just it was a continual thing.
Right on. Give me a synopsis of your education from high school and beyond. Where'd you go with the education?
I went to high school and then I went to the New England Conservatory of Music, did an undergraduate degree there. Okay. And then my education continued, and really the most important part of my education was living in the next 8, 9, 10 years in New York City. And then I am getting another degree right now. As you know, I'm back and forth. I live in New York City and I live in Boston. So I travel back and forth basically every week, getting another degree.
Right on.
Yeah.
The thing that's always interesting to me about jazz musicians specifically is there's always a very, very clear push to get more degrees. And I don't see that as much in other realms of music. What is it about the classroom and that kind of jazz education? It really lures people.
What it is it's very difficult to make a living, a comfortable living, I should say, a comfortable living being a jazz musician, especially a saxophonist. The fallback is teaching. And you can't get a teaching job without a higher degree. It's an interesting world in education, and there are people that can play really, who are on the top and can play great and then also get degrees. It's just there aren't very many. I mean, you'd be shocked at the people that you listen to who are on the top of the radio charts or on top of or on the magazine covers or whatever. They all teach. Everyone teaches. There's maybe, 5 or less that don't teach. I mean, Keith Jarrett doesn't teach. Everyone teaches, and everyone needs that degree. Now it's becoming harder and harder to get a great teaching job without at least a master's degree. So that's what it is. That's kind of where we are now. Yeah. But that's okay. I mean, there's nothing wrong with learning more.
So let's talk about the ultimate education in your life. You moved to New York City. You get baptized by the jazz cauldron, so to speak, and you start playing with Cecil McBee and John McNeil. What was it like to initially get in that environment and go?
Oh, yeah. Well, when I moved to New York City, I remember Cecil McBee said, "Call me the second you move." And so we went and had some beers and talked and played a bunch of gigs together, and that was fantastic. I love Cecil. I learned a lot just hanging out in the rehearsals with him, kind of being the fly on the wall and 20 or so, and hanging around. I remember we had an 8-hour rehearsal at Cecil's house. It was like 3 or 4 hours, and then Cecil's wife made the most unbelievable dinner for us. And then we had another 3 or 4 hour rehearsal after. And it was like me and George Cables and Victor Lewis and Eddie Henderson and Cecil McBee. I mean, the stories going around. I mean, everybody was telling stories about the beginning of their career until, the present day. I mean, it was fantastic to be around those people. You don't get to do that very often. So Cecil is a great learning experience for me. And John McNeil, wonderful trumpeter, we played together every single Wednesday night, 3 sets from 9 to 1. at a little jazz club in Brooklyn, which now doesn't exist anymore, but for almost a year. I think it was about 10 months. So just being around someone like John every week, playing 3 sets, was a great experience. I really, and also the stories. I mean, people that know John know he's an amazing storyteller, and he's hilarious. So that was great. And I mean, playing in bands with people like Fred Hersch has been a great experience. And yeah, it's not only the music though; it's learning how people lead bands and learning how, seeing other people as sidemen and seeing how they dress and seeing how they present themselves on stage. Besides the fact that Fred Hersch is an amazing pianist and, among other things, I remember standing on stage with Fred and he said this, it sounds so ridiculous, but I remember Fred said, at the bass, this is John Aber. At the drums, that's Billy Drummond. At the saxophone, that's Noah Preminger. And I liked the way he said at for some reason. It sounds so stupid, but so now I say at the guitar, this is Ben Monitor. At the, whatever. It's just like little things you learn along the way that kind of, as silly as it is, but introducing the band is a big thing.
Yeah.
Somebody else who is fantastic at that is Christian McBride. He's an unbelievably great, he's a master at with stage presence and being an entertainer. So they're just little things you learn along the way. There's so much to being a professional jazz musician that isn't really spoken about.
Yeah.
The little things. So.
Well, it's interesting. I always hear that not only just the legends, but the jazz journeymen, those older guys are the funniest people on the planet.
Yeah. I have some pretty unbelievable stories.
I bet.
Actually, I'm writing a book, and there's a lot of stories that are in that book. So
yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing what they've seen. So, in your life, you released your debut album, Dry Bridge Road, just after your 21st birthday, and it was named the debut of the year in the Village Voice Critics poll. That had to be a great feeling, getting into New York and getting that kind of acclaim immediately.
Yeah, very cool. I remember the day after I moved to New York City, I had a Sunday New York Times review, and I thought I was like the king of the world. And then I remember someone said to me, who I have an incredible amount of respect for, he said, man, congrats on that review. But just always remember, that review and $2.50 is enough for one subway ride to get back home. And what he's saying is, man, stay humble. It takes a lot to be a professional musician. One little review ain't going to mean anything to you. So, be humble and just keep working. That meant more to me than the review itself,
Yeah, absolutely. So talk to me a little bit about, in your life, you've had a lot of good teachers. You continue your education. Who do you think has taught you the most about jazz?
Dave Liebman is someone I studied with when I was young. I consider him to be one of the more important role models when I was growing up. I studied with Dave when I was now 12 or 13 or 14 or so. He taught me a lot about the business. He taught me a lot about being cool. He taught me a lot about, different concepts within, being a jazz musician and a saxophonist. And so that was important to me. And along the way, there have been numerous people who have been important to me as well. I try to learn from everyone that I'm around. When I was in growing up in high school or college or playing with people or watching seeing a performance, I try to learn what I want and what I don't want to be like. And so a lot of people, are so quick to dismiss something or say that it's the greatest thing they've ever heard. Things like, you hear that all the time. Someone say, oh, I heard this concert the other night. It's like the best concert I've ever seen in my life. Or, God, that guy really sucks. I hate that. There's so much there that you should be talking about. Why did you hate it? Did you not like his sound? Did you not like his stage presence? Did you not like the material? Did you think that the material didn't flow well from one to the next? Was it too much of the same? Was it kind of random sounding? Did the guitarist not fit in and it should have been a pianist? Should there have been no chords? I could go on and on. Or what did you like about it? Did he have a really unbelievably, did he have an unbelievable altissimo register? Did his low notes speak really nicely with subtoning? I mean, there are so many things you can, in diagnosing a player, that's something that is really important to me. I like seeing shows. I don't really as much like listening to recorded music, but I like seeing shows from time to time and getting an idea as to what's really going on, and that really helps me as a musician to learn. And that took me a while to do. I mean, for a long time I would say, "Oh, that sucked," and then I don't know, somewhere along the line, someone says like, "Well, why does that suck?" Or why is that great? And that's been really helpful for me.
At the top of the hour, or at the top of the interview, we talked about you putting out albums at a more, fluent rate. And you have something to say. What are you wanting to say? What are you saying with your music to the world?
I'm explaining to people that there is a lot of love in music. And this that live record I made, I want people to hear the intensity and feel the intensity and the love in the music. I mean, I want people to feel and hear that in everything I do. The sincerity, the intensity, and the overpowering amount of love that the band is, projecting. I want people to come away with that. I want them to go, wow. And so I hope that last record did that. This new record I made, there's so much love in this record. I mean, we spent 2 days, I bought the band for 2 days, and we went to this unbelievably, here I am saying, like, unbelievably great about everything. I'm sort of eating my own words here, but a wonderful jazz club called The Side Door. It's in southern Connecticut. And we recorded all day for 2 days and hung out each night. And Jimmy Katz and his wife Dina Katz came and took video and engineered the whole thing. Everybody was totally into it. Everybody really put their heart into it. And so in this band, I mean, these guys are special, really special, as people and as musicians. And they are, like I said, they're sincere and they play with love, and always it's like the last day on earth when they play. And that's what I want to hear. That's what I want to be around. I mean, a while back someone pointed out, I think it was like Joe Lovano was playing, and we went to see a concert, and they said, this is like he's playing, like it's the last day on earth. Like he means it. And I think that's so important. That's how I want to play every time I play. So that's what I want people to feel. That's the message I want to send, that there's so much love, and this music is sincere, and feel something.
Speaking of feeling something, talk to me a little bit about, we're as good as the giants, the shoulders we stand on. Who have you admired the most in the world of jazz that you've listened to over the years? I know Joshua Redman's on the list, but is there anybody else that's really big that's been kind of in your periscope, so to speak?
I have a huge admiration for John Coltrane. It's somebody who like I've been saying, plays with love and sincerity and urgency, kind of, and was able to produce so much music in such a short amount of time, all of which was incredible. They were unbelievable statements every time he played. It wasn't just, let's put out this thing and collect our paycheck and move on to the next thing or whatever. Everything was a huge statement. That's admirable. Miles Davis is another one who did all those things. I mean, I was always a big Fish fan growing up, and I still am. I think Fish is sort of like the modern rock version of, improvising rock people. I mean, I love the way that they build when they have group improvisation, and that's kind of what I grew up on. Really just Train's my guy. I love John Coltrane. I love people for different things. Train has it all. I mean, you can put on Train from any period, and you're just like, holy crap, this is some. I mean, it floors you, me.
Let me ask you this in a very general sense, but it's it packs a punch. Why do you love jazz?
My initial reaction to that question is I don't really love jazz. I love certain personalities that are jazz musicians for all the things we've been talking about. I think improvisation is the highest level of, being an improviser is the highest level of musicianship. Being able to take in a huge amount of knowledge and then try to let it back out in your own words. I think that is the highest level of musicianship. And so people that can do that, I love those people, man. I love that music. That makes me feel so good hearing that. When people don't spew out things that they've heard before, but when they take the history of music and they create their own individual voice. And so you hear that from people like Joe Lovano now. You hear that from people like Ornette Coleman. You heard that from people like Train, Miles. You hear the influence sometimes, but it's them. It's Train. It's he dipped his feet in everything that came before him and around his time, and then he created his own individual voice. And we were talking a little about education before. I think that's something that seriously lacks in education these days. It stops a lot of the time with, hey man, check out Coleman Hawkins, Lester Young, Billie Holiday, and those people, or Duke Ellington and John Coltrane and Charlie Parker and Lee Morgan and Chet Baker and Jerry Mulligan and Art Tatum and Bud Powell, and check all those guys out, transcribe them, and then play like them, and then that's it. End of class, end of semester, end of the year, end of your education, and then you get people who sound like them. I don't want to listen to anyone who sounds like Chet Baker. I want to listen to Chet Baker. I don't want to hear anyone who sounds like Michael Brecker. I want to hear Brecker. So I think the most important thing is learning how to take what the masters did, or anybody has done, and incorporate it into your own playing, but then develop your own voice. And so, when I teach, that's how I teach my students. They need to learn what has happened, and they need to understand it, and they need to create variations on that and develop their own individual identity. What were we talking about?
No, you did it. You went full circle. That's beautiful.
Okay.
What I want to ask you next is this. You've talked about releasing more albums. Let's say we hook up in 10 years and I ask you what's been going on. How many albums? What do you want to see? What do you want to keep doing in your career?
Right now, what I want to do is I want to record, and I want to perform, and I want to teach motivated people what I'm doing and what they should do to become better musicians. And that's all. I want to spread my music with my sidemen who are part of my unit. I want to show everybody what stories we have to tell. I want to dig deeper and deeper into composition. I want people to hear me play the saxophone.
So let me ask you this, my final question. Everybody has a perception of who Noah is. Your fans, your students, your family, your friends, people that are helping you set up your gigs. But who do you think you are?
That's a great question, man. You got great questions. Who do I think I am? I think I am a person that wants to help other people. I think that I am someone that wants to just pour out love into everything I do. And I'm somebody who really means what I do. If I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it, and I'm going to give 1,000,000%. And I want to make other people happy. I want everybody to feel like, everyone that's around me, I want them to feel like I'm adding something. and I want them to feel like they're adding something. I want everyone to feel loved, basically. I want everybody to feel good. That's all.
Right on.
That's
Beautiful.
pretty much it, yeah.
That's cool. That's a perfect way to end. Noah, thank you for taking some time out, opening up, and giving me your story, man. I appreciate it.
Joe, thank you so much for the questions and the time, and it's a pleasure to talk to you, man.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to yet another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest jazz players in New York, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Noah for his music, his insights, and all of that cool. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino on the iTunes Store, or visit theneonjazz.blogspot.com for all things Neon Jazz. Until next time, enjoy the music, my friends.
Neon Jazz.